Consciousness. The guy I'm living up with in Humboldt, he's a nurse, and he was a biology major in college. And in his chemistry classes, and this is up at Humboldt State in Northern California, and so most of his professors are naturalist, materialist scientists. They only believe in the physical material world. And he would ask them, what is the chemical equation of consciousness? And they didn't like that. And because consciousness isn't a physical material thing, so how do we study it? But that's something that we have as human beings, and not just human beings. I believe animals are conscious. I would even go so far to say plants are conscious. And it has to do with this being a living being. There is a type of conscious awareness. So explaining the nature of consciousness is one of the most important and perplexing areas of philosophy, but the concept is notoriously ambiguous. The abstract noun consciousness is not frequently used by itself in the contemporary literature, but originally derived from the Latin con, with, and scire, to know. Perhaps the most commonly used contemporary notion of a conscious mental state is captured by Thomas Nagel's famous "What is it like?" And this has to do with the article he wrote, and I put the links for you. And I think it's in the next slide or two, about it's "What is it like to be a bat?" is this article he wrote, because he said we can study all. He says we can study all sorts of things externally and empirically, through our microscopes and our telescopes and our CAT scans. But he says, how do you study consciousness? What's the tools for studying the psyche? You can't use a microscope or telescope. You can't use a CAT scan to find someone's consciousness. So where is it and what is it? And I would relate it back to our discussion of what the mind is. It's part of that non-tangible part of being human. Any other thoughts on consciousness out there? What it is? Yes.
Being a living being, you have consciousness. Relate that to the plants.
So being conscious means you have an internal sense of awareness of being and how things are affecting you. So, and this is part of what Thomas Nagel's article, maybe I need to write an article of what is it like to be a tree, but he wrote, what is it like to be a bat? Because he said bats are mammals like us. They obviously have an internal world going on, but there's different from us in other ways. For example, instead of using their eyes, their primarily sense of information gathering is through their ears. And they have sonar, and they chirp their way through the world to collect the sound waves bouncing back, and they can navigate in flight. They can catch food. They can find a mate, all through their ears, through this sonar that somehow, I'm assuming, their brain is making images in their head coming through sound waves, where ours is coming through light waves through our eyes, is how I'm making images in my head. But remember, the stuff I'm seeing I'm not seeing it out there. I'm seeing everything in here. And that is freaky to think about. So what Thomas Nagel's asking is, what is it like to be a bat? And I kind of want to save that for next week, where for those of you that are interested, I put two links up. One is the full article, but it's like 15 pages long. And the other is someone did a blog that summarized it, but he did an excellent job in one page summarizing the 15. So whatever you have time for, or maybe you'll like the one page one and say, I want to read the whole article. But after about page 3, here's a little spoiler. Thomas Nagel realizes, I don't think we can know what it's like to be a bat, because in order to know what it's like to be a bat, you would have to be a bat. That's not something a human studying bats externally can tell. Now we can measure how much they weigh. We can look at their genetics, their DNA, anything physical we can measure and hypothesize or theorize about. But what about the internal conscious state of a bat's awareness? How in the world do we begin to even think about that? But I think that's super pertinent when we bring it back into psychology, because that's in a sense what you all are trying to do in a sense with your clients. And you are trying to get them to share with you their internal subjective condition. But I think you would probably agree, and I want to get into this a lot more next week when we talk about existential philosophy, is even if someone tells us everything, if they're completely transparent and everything else, because we're not them, we're going to miss stuff. Because even what they're sharing is going to have unique, specific meaning to them than it's going to have to you, because you're not them, basically. When I am in a conscious mental state, there is something it is like for me to be in that state from the subjective or first person point of view. But how are we to understand this? For instance, how is the conscious mental state related to the body? Can consciousness be explained in terms of brain activity? What makes a mental state be a conscious mental state? The problem of consciousness is arguably the most central issue in current philosophy of mind, and is also importantly related to major traditional topics in metaphysics, such as the possibility of immortality and the belief in free will. This article focuses on Western theories and conceptions of consciousness, especially as found in contemporary and analytic philosophy of mind.